When was the last time you sat across the table and spoke to somebody who works in finance in your company? When it did not involve asking for an approval or explaining to them why you're spending what you're spending. The finance team in any organization is some of the smartest people that you will find who work quietly and efficiently towards keeping the company profitable. On a lot of occasions, people who don't work in finance, they don't completely understand what finance does. How do we ensure that the finance team connects better with other functions, and how do we ensure that the common employee is able to understand first of all what finance does and incorporate something from them that can help them in their work? Let's close the loop on this. Joining me on Close the Loop is Vivek Venkatesan, the CFO of Ninja Cart. Vivek, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So you are the first finance leader who has come on Close the Loop.
Pleasure.
And as a non-finance person, the first question is, why is finance so poorly understood by those who don't work in finance?
I would rather say, make it slightly broader, saying I think cross-functional understanding is lacking across organizations. It's not only finance, and also finance understanding the other functions, or the other functions understanding a team like HR. So I think cross-functional understanding is lacking in a lot of and that I think is the crux of a lot of issues which relates to interpersonal conflicts and lack of collaboration when things can be done much simpler. I think it's just not finance, and I think probably it's more accentuated in finance because finance is always perceived to be a very specialist domain where people don't want to get into the technicalities, and it's beyond comprehension of a few people where I think, and that is one reason. The second thing is also the finance guys are technically gifted people, and I think the way they come across also sometimes may be a bit more technical for people to understand and comprehend. It is both ways, and I think across all the functions, probably one of the functions that is I think most misunderstood is finance. And I've been fortunate to have worked in multinational setups to large setups within India, and then kind of startup environments. I have not seen this changing or over a period of time. So it's been a common pattern I've noticed across the markets I've worked in.
Yeah, because what happens because of that is you see finance as someone that you have to go to for a sign of approval. Okay, they process your payroll and all of that. But when it comes to the general working of a function, I have to talk. It's not like I need to or I want to. It's like I have to go and interact with someone in finance because they are the ones who put a tick mark. And do you think that one of the fallouts of this lack of understanding is that sometimes finance also doesn't understand? And that's also a frustration that a lot of functions have, that, okay, I want to run this campaign. I know the value of it. How do I sit across the table and explain to a finance person why I need to do this?
See, a couple of things, right? One, at an operating level, when it comes to getting some of these things approved, it could be just an invoice payment. I'll come to the larger aspects in terms of, let's say, marketing campaign, which happens at a CFO level. Even when it comes to, let's say, opening a bank account, for instance, or making a cross-border payment. When an interaction happens with a finance guy, see, I think a couple of things, right, where the misunderstanding comes is the finance guy is actually the gatekeeper or the custodian of controls within the company. So if you do something which is against, let's say, the tax laws of the country, or is against the FEMA regulations, or is against the RBI guidelines, it will pose a small transaction can cause a larger issue, right? So the finance guys are wired not to compromise on controls.
So de-risking
at any point in time. Now, I think from a finance standpoint, I think where there is room for improvement. There are always things which are critical, absolutely not to be compromised, and then there are some things which are good to have, right? So your application to the situation in terms of urgency really plays down, right? So there are things which the finance team will put foot down and say, boss, this is required because this is as per law, and some things may be good to have, and that is somewhere I think flexibility can be exercised, number one. And number two, also I think from a communication standpoint, sometimes the finance teams don't do a great job in communicating why it is required so that the person on the other side
Right.
understands that. On the other side, technically, when there is a dependency, when do you actually approach a finance team?
Yeah.
You only approach a finance team when there is a payment to be made.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
There's a-
Or when there is a bank account to be opened, or there is some transaction which is stuck, which needs to be resolved, right? Now, the expectation also from the other side is that the finance guys have a lot of other things to do on a BAU basis, is to drop everything
And then run after that.
only run after this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And expectation from the other side is also show the same level of urgency.
Yeah. Without context.
Without context, right?
Right.
First of all, be very clear in terms of if it is super urgent. Then that needs to be communicated on terms of why it is super urgent, and then the finance team obviously will be flexible.
Yes.
But if you come to the finance team, 5 to 6 times in a day when everything is super urgent, then the urgency itself
Correct.
loses value. Yesterday, I think I read a very interesting LinkedIn post about the fake urgencies which get created.
Yes.
People create a buffer.
Just to hustle
right?
other
Just to hustle, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if there are 5 other things which are super urgent, then obviously, you have only finite resources, right? So that is one. The second thing also, I think, which is misunderstood, is that there are a lot of dependencies for the finance team also, because normally you depend on a banker or an external party, or if let's say there is a foreign remittance that needs to be done, you need to get a certification in place where there's an external party involved. So these are not like click of the button. You have dependencies on external parties.
A lot of people don't understand why finance requires things in a certain way. Maybe finance should take the... And on the other side of the fence, like someone like me who's a non-finance person, also needs to be conscious that I cannot go in the last minute for an invoice. Like a vendor would have sent me an invoice and it's been sitting in my inbox for 30 days. And 2 days before it's due, I'll send it out.
That's usually the case.
That's usually the case.
We've
Right?
seen, so the finance guy also will build his perception.
Yeah.
Having said that, one more thing I think the finance team, and which is, I've been a strong proponent of this, is that finance function in more established companies has got the level of investment it requires, but then in companies which are coming up the curve, I still think it is underinvested.
Right.
So, lot of this actually, most of these in today's digital world, right? Most of these interactions itself can be avoided.
Right.
I'm not saying for the sake of avoiding the interactions. And the interactions can be limited to only exception handling.
Correct.
Provided you get your systems and process in place.
Right.
So if there is a very clear system process and the other guy on the side gets a login, for instance, right, with a workflow very clearly defined, him getting instructed in terms of what to do.
Yeah.
It solves most of the. Then it is only a question of TAT, the process cycle time that takes over.
Right.
Which I think automation, digitization, process improvement, documentation, and communication, I think, is the key.
In our line of work, we interact with a lot of HRs who work in tandem with finance because they together decide on benefits, employee benefits, in our case, health benefits. So how do you see finance interacting with the people function? Because, on the other side of the fence, we speak to a lot of HRs who say that I have a vision towards a benefit, the way it should look for my employee, but I can't seem to convince my CFO that, they have to spend this little extra to give this little thing. And they always ask me, what is the ROI? And all that. Do you think there is, again, a scope for finance and HR to kind of understand?
No, I think it is across. And when you spoke about ROI, right?
Right.
See, one thing which I have realized, through my career in finance is a one-size-fit-all approach doesn't work. You have to really, a lot of aspects, right? Which industry, the maturity of the organization, right? A lot of this plays into your decision making. So, for instance, I cannot, in a mature organization where you typically look at a deal based on an IRR or an ROI basis, that the same benchmark cannot be applied for a growing organization.
Yes. Like, what would you expect the HR to come to you with?
First is, I would expect the why part of it. Right? So I would have expected, for instance, if you are coming to me with a specific benefit case for the employees, 2-3 things I'll look for. I'll not even, in my view and the way that I will look for, I'll not even look for, because the ROI here is intangible.
Right.
I look for what is the genesis of that idea. Why did we come up with this? Was there, employees coming up with a grievance, or did we go across, find out from employees, top 5 things which we want to change, and this is one. Second thing is, have we done some level of competition benchmarking in the industry, right, or across the domain, saying, boss, this is very basic which is required.
Right.
Third is discussion with the CEO, what is the people agenda, and how does this fit into the people agenda. If I think you have clarity on these three things, right? Most of the conversation is done.
Right.
What happens typically in, I think, and this is and broadly applicable to all the functions, is that finance gets engaged at the last when you actually have to sign a bill.
Again,
Right?
lack of context.
Again, lack of context, lack of timing. Then you will say, boss, we've finalized everything. The CEO is aligned, right? And the payment has to go tomorrow.
Right.
Right? So in that case, right, how would you expect a finance leader to?
Of course,
Because now tomorrow, if I sign the check, right, and it really results in the cost ratios not being right, because there's lots to do with also timing of a spend. Right? Because the other context which can be given is that completely aligned with you, but can you look at deferring this? And this is why and the finance leader's responsibility is also to communicate to the other side, saying why I'm saying what I'm saying, because all of them are senior leaders, right? As HR as a senior leader will understand the org context.
Right.
But I think it's both ways, right? If you come to a CFO just the day before a scheme launch, and then you say that just sign and it's been aligned to say, then I'll say, boss, I have no value to add here.
Exactly.
Right? Because I have no value to add. And the reason also is that if you give time, the finance leader also, if this is in the right place, will also come up to you with a lot of suggestions on how to make this not only efficient, but also make it more employee friendly.
Right.
Hey, he will say, boss, I have also in my team also figured out, one or two these and this you can make this this way. And I may reach out to my network. Right. And then figure out, look, we're trying to come out with something like this. How are you guys dealing with this? And there could be certain technical aspects like taxation or whatever, which could be beneficial for the employees, which may not be in the HR domain.
Exactly.
So I think it's a question of timing, contextualization.
So bring finance in early,
collaborate, and more in terms of, and context is why you're doing what you're doing.
Right.
And then how have you come to this point?
Exactly. So in conclusion, Vivek, if I were to ask you for your advice to the finance community at large, both junior and senior people, in terms of how a modern finance professional should be in today's times, what would be a few points that you would share?
Actually, I'm also learning. I'm also trying to cope up being a modern finance professional. I don't think there's any playbook to this. I'll just say what should be critical playbook and what they need to change also. One, I think, most important, right? Integrity for a finance professional is not to be compromised. Because and sadly I've seen some circumstances where within the finance function it is like the gatekeeper giving keys to a thief being the thief himself. Integrity in a finance function is non-compromisable at any stage, and it could be financial matters like payment related, or it could be for instance if there is a mistake which has happened. A lot of times I've seen people reluctant to come and admit this because for fear of repercussion. And it hits the organization a bad way when it gets found out later. So integrity clearly is not compromisable. And obviously at the early stage, I would rather say broad base yourself across domains in finance. You should do, and luckily I had an opportunity. I had done reasonable amount of stints business partnering and in business finance, and I did stints in technical side also before. And that's not, I'm saying, a chartered way of getting to a CFO, but spend as much as time as possible across domains in finance, and given an opportunity, do a business role, do a P&L role. Right? Because I've seen a lot of successful CFOs coming from a P&L domain. Because at a CFO level, and if that is your aspiration as a finance professional, you are more a general manager. You are not supposed to be an expert. Right? And for that, you need to be very conscious in terms of one, broad basing your initial stint, reading a lot. Not only in your domain, across domains. Developing, consciously working on your soft skills. Right? How do you communicate, collaborate across the organization? All of this builds into you. As a professional, you get more confidence, you get more context, and that builds you as a leader, and get as much diverse exposure as possible. And by all means, do business roles, and even within your domain, right, try to also go, even let's say you're doing a accounting role or a business finance role, go to the markets where your business operates and find out on the ground what's happening.
Yeah.
Right? So diversify.
Great. So thanks so much, Vivek, for your time and coming on Close the Loop. Really appreciate your views.
Thank you so much, Srini, for the opportunity. I hope I did some level of demystification about the finance function, but thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.